Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We will begin the meeting in just a few minutes.
Muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos a esta reunión comunitaria sobre el Salton Sea, presentada por la Agencia de Recursos Naturales de California. Mi nombre es Moisés Moreno Rivera y soy el secretario adjunto de Equidad y Justicia Ambiental de la Agencia de Recursos Naturales de California. El propósito de la presentación del día de hoy es de poder clarificar los procesos del Salton Sea, incluyendo el plan de largo plazo. Además, informar a la comunidad de cómo pueden participar y mantenerse involucrados en estos procesos. Gracias por acompañarnos. Good afternoon. Thank you and welcome to this community meeting on the Salton Sea, hosted by the California Natural Resources Agency. I am Moisés Moreno Rivera, Assistant Secretary for Equity and Environmental Justice. The purpose of today's presentation is to help clarify the processes being undertaken within the Salton Sea, including the long-range plan, and inform community members as to how they can participate and get involved in these processes. Thank you again for joining. I will now like to introduce Sarah Friedman and Joanny Leiva from the Better World Group. Joanny Leiva is a research assistant with the Better World Group advisors, providing guidance and support on projects ranging from AB 617 implementation to the development of community benefits. Previous to this role, Joanny worked as a program coordinator, advocate, and educator. In all of Joanny's work, has been finding ways to combat equity issues. Sarah Friedman is a senior policy director with the Better World Group Advisors, providing policy strategy and guidance to groups working to protect lands and waters throughout California. Sarah's background is in the energy and environmental law and policy, including many years of advocacy around the Salton Sea. Sarah's current role is to assist the Salton Sea team by facilitating the long-term planning committee and to identify and support ways community amenities can be a part of the Salton Sea management. Joanny will begin the meeting by grounding us around the tools we will use over the course of the meeting, and Sarah will lead us through the presentation and will facilitate the question and answer portion and public comments portion of the meeting. Thank you so much. Let us get started.
We'll go to the next slide. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joanny, and I will be guiding us through some instructions and guidelines for the day. I will provide the instructions in English and Spanish while we make sure that everyone is in their correct language channel. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Joanny, nos guiaré con unas instrucciones de Zoom y reglas del día. Hoy contamos con interpretación en vivo del inglés al español. Para escoger su idioma preferido, por favor, haga clic en el símbolo del globo al fondo de su pantalla. Si está usando Zoom en su tableta o su celular y no ve esa opción, por favor haga clic en los tres puntos donde dice More y va a tener la opción para escoger su idioma. También asegúrese de escoger que no pueda escuchar el audio seleccionando Mute Original Audio. Así solo escucha en español. We have live interpretation from English to Spanish today. If you're using the Zoom application on your phone or tablet, you might not be able to see that globe icon at the bottom of your screen. And you can find that by selecting the 3 dots that say more. If not, just go ahead and select the icon that looks like a globe and says interpretation and select your preferred language. Also make sure to mute the original audio so you only hear the audio coming in your preferred language. Next slide. Okay, so we also just have some general Zoom instructions for the afternoon. We have closed captioning available in English, and you can enable that by clicking on the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will also be using the Q&A feature. I'm so sorry, give me a second. We will also be using the Q&A feature, the question and answer, to answer any questions during our comments period. If you are on the webinar, you can request to speak by using the raise your hand button, so symbol with the hand. If you're joining us through the teleconference line, you can press #2 to also be able to call in. Each speaker will have a time limit. You can also submit questions using the Q&A feature. If you are joining us through Facebook Live in Spanish on the Salton Sea page, you may submit your comment or question in the comment box, and a member of our team will repeat it on Zoom to be answered. Hoy también tenemos subtítulos en inglés. Los puede empezar usando el símbolo de CC al fondo de su pantalla. Vamos a utilizar la opción de Q y A para hacer preguntas y tomar comentarios durante el periodo de comentarios públicos. Para pedir hablar en el seminario virtual, haga clic en el botón de Raise Hand, que es el símbolo de la mano. Si está en la teleconferencia, puede presionar el numeral 2 para poder también hacer su pregunta a voz alta. También puede enviar una pregunta utilizando la función de preguntas y respuestas. Si está con nosotros por Facebook Live en español, puede enviar su comentario o pregunta en el cuadro de comentarios y un miembro de nuestro equipo repetirá su comentario o pregunta en Zoom para que pueda obtener una respuesta. Another reminder to please have everyone join the English or Spanish channel, regardless of whether you need interpretation or not. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. To make sure that there's a respectful and inclusive space, we also just have a couple of meeting ground rules to go through. We ask that everyone respect each other's opinions, knowledge, and perspectives, that we are all conscious of time, and that we all please speak slowly and clearly for our great interpreters that are on the line. Para asegurarnos que este es un espacio respetuoso e inclusivo, tenemos un par de reglas básicas para todos. Pedimos que todos respeten las opiniones, conocimientos y perspectivas de todos, que seamos conscientes del tiempo y que hablemos despacio y claro para los intérpretes. Next slide, please. Okay. We will also be using Mentormeter today to do some live polling. Mentormeter is an online tool that allows to display results in real time. So we are all going to set this up together right now to use it throughout the meeting. So you can join Mentormeter either through your phone or through any device just by going to menti.com. So if everyone can either open up a tab on your phone or your computer or your laptop and go to menti.com, that's menti.com, and you will be prompted to enter a code. The code is 3756511. And you can just leave this tab open throughout the whole presentation and it will automatically go to our next polling question. So there's no need to enter this again. If you do accidentally click this off for any reason, we'll always have it on the top of the screen when we're on a polling question. So it's fine, you can just leave it open to make things easier. And we can go to the next slide to do our first polling question, just to get everyone used to the tool. So our first question for today, just to get a sense of who's joining us here today, is what is the name of the city or community where you live? And we can go to the next slide to start seeing the live results. Okay, we're just refreshing that. All right, great. If you get prompted to go to the correct slide, please just go ahead and click yes or click go to the correct slide. And we have a couple coming in. We see La Quinta, Palm Springs, Palm Desert, see Sacramento, we have Riverside, LA, San Diego. Let's give this a couple more seconds. Coachella. Give 5 more seconds. All right, so it seems like we have a lot of folks from La Quinta, San Diego, Sacramento, and Palm Springs. It's great to see such a large representation from Southern California. And just another reminder to please leave this tab open. Well, it'll just automatically take us to the next question, okay? So I think we can go ahead and send this back to Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Moy, for the kind opening, and Joanne for grounding us in the technology and tools for the day. As mentioned, my name is Sarah Friedman. I'm with Federal Group Advisors, and I'm going to be supporting the Salton Sea team on a few things around the Long Range Planning Committee, community amenities, and a bit of other engagement. I want to start by saying I'm really honored and privileged to be here today. I have tremendous respect for the communities and resources at the Salton Sea, and just really excited to be part of this process. I also want to recognize the folks who took time out of their day today to be in this virtual room from their jobs or their communities or their families. This is a hard time for all of us, and there's a lot going on, and really want to recognize that time. I think it really points to the activism and community strength of those who live and care about the sea. Also, you know, I think as Moy mentioned, there's a lot of processes underway right now. And I understand from my own experience, sometimes it's hard to figure out which ones are most productive to engage in. So really kind of see this day as these presentations as a great way to figure out, you know, how these processes will work together and how best to use your time productively. So I'm going to start by leading us through a little overview of the rest of the meeting. We will go into more detail on our presenters as they come up, but we have a great lineup, starting with Secretary Wade Crowfoot, the head of the Natural Resources Agency, Assistant Secretary Arturo Delgado, who's lead for the Salton Sea Management Program. We will have an opportunity to meet Dr. Raminder Sori, who is a recognized scientist who will be leading the independent review panel, and then myself, who you have just met. Next slide, please. Great. So here's an overview of the rest of our meeting. Want to note there will be polling questions interspersed throughout the meeting. So as Joanne mentioned, good to keep the Mentormeter up there. The goal of those questions is to help the state answer a few questions that they've been wrestling with. So we'll start the meeting with some welcoming remarks from Secretary Crowfoot, who will give a really high-level state leadership perspective on the Salton Sea. Next, we will have Assistant Secretary Delgado. He is going to explain exactly what the long-term plan is, why it matters, where the Salton Sea team is in developing the plan, and the role of the long-term planning committee and how that committee and the public will help shape the long-range plan. We will then meet Dr. Sori, who is noted is a water expert and a professor, and he will explain a bit about the independent review panel that will be reviewing water import projects, and again, how the public can best engage in that process. Next, I'm going to speak very briefly on community amenities engagement so far. Finally, we're going to have a really good opportunity for questions and answers and public comments. There are a lot of folks here today, so we ask that questions or comments be limited to 3 minutes per person so that everyone can have an opportunity to speak and be heard. I'll also note we have a lot of folks here today that might not be at every Salton Sea meeting. So including Dr. Sori and some of his team. So I recommend that folks, in terms of their questions and comments, really try to think about the presentations that we will be hearing today and tailor those to that. Great, so then we will have some very brief closing remarks and close the meeting. And I'll also note, I think to clarify, Thursday's meeting will be the same. So there will be no need for community members to attend twice. Next slide, please. Great, so I'm truly honored to introduce California Natural Resources Secretary, Wade Crowfoot. Secretary Crowfoot has spent many years advocating for the communities and natural resources at the Salton Sea, and we're truly honored and lucky to have him in this position. During his tenure, we've seen a real increase in focus on equity and access through all levels of the agency, and we have seen key new hiring and programming and budget for the Salton Sea. Although he oversees a staff of 21,000, I think we can safely say at any given time he is thinking about the Salton Sea. So I'm excited to turn it over to Secretary Crowfoot for his remarks.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Your introduction means a lot. I wanted to start my remarks with a brief introduction in Spanish. Bienvenidos a esta reunión. Me llamo Wade Crowfoot y yo soy el líder de Agencia de Recursos Naturales del Estado de California. Nuestra agencia tiene una responsabilidad para las condiciones en el Salton Sea. Lo siento, para mi español es muy básico, pero pienso que es importante que hablo un poco en español ahora para mostrar nuestra prioridad, colectar y entender sus ideas y observaciones en todos idiomas de todas comunidades con cualquier perspectiva existe. Entonces, gracias para su participación hoy. Sus ideas nos ayudarán a construir la futura del Salton Sea. So as Sarah mentioned, my name is Wade Crowfoot and I lead this agency called the Natural Resources Agency. We have a responsibility to stabilize and improve conditions at the Salton Sea. Our agency includes two departments that work directly at the Salton Sea, one called the Department of Water Resources, the other the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And there are many different organizations, agency, governments working to improve the sea. We are only one of them, but we lead the effort from state government, which is why we're organizing this discussion. I want to acknowledge the tribal government and tribal governments, including the Torres Martinez tribe, our partners in Imperial and Riverside counties, leaders of the Salton Sea Authority focused on the work that we do, the Imperial Irrigation District, the Coachella Valley Water District, the Imperial County Air Pollution District, and our federal agency partners. For those that don't follow this effort very closely, that is a lot of different organizations working together. And so today we're going to try to explain very clearly what's happening at the sea and where your ideas, your thoughts, your suggestions can be helpful to the future of the sea. We are focused on two things at the Natural Resources Agency with the sea. The first is implementing what's called a 10-year plan, focused on restoring or improving 30,000 acres at the sea, including dust suppression projects to reduce dust and habitat restoration projects to provide habitat for fish and wildlife. Now, you all know, if you live around the sea, that the sea has been receding for several years, meaning it's been shrinking. And that results from water management decisions made 2 decades ago. And as the sea has shrunk, that has exposed lake bed, which we know of, we call it playa, and that has the potential and is in fact worsening air quality and creating more air quality problems that are already challenging in this part of California. It has also shrunk the amount of water habitat that birds and fish can use. The state government, my agency, is responsible for doing something about this. And so over the next 10 years, we are focused on implementing, creating a number of projects to restore water onto the exposed lake bed, and also to try different and to use different methods to permanently suppress dust from the lake bed. This is critically important, as you know better than I do, for public health, for the lives of community members, and of course, for the natural environment. We'll also talk today about an effort we're undertaking as we implement all those projects to plan for the longer future of the Salton Sea. We call this the long-range planning process. We have a focus of getting several projects done at the sea in the next decade, but the open question exists: what about the future of the sea? What will the Salton Sea look like in 20, 30, 40, 50 years? And we are developing that plan over the next year, year and a half. And your input will help us develop that plan. One of the big questions that we're working to answer is whether it's possible to bring in or import water from other places to restore the Salton Sea and inundate and to cover with water a large portion of the sea. There are several interesting creative ideas to import water, but we need to ask whether they can be done, whether the engineering solutions exist to do them, and whether we can find the funding if they're feasible from a financial perspective. In order to answer this question about the feasibility, the doability of water importation, we have secured an independent set of experts from across the country, the leader of whom you'll hear from today, to look at all of these different water import projects and assess the feasibility of these projects. The Salton Sea's future could include water importation, or if these projects are not found to be feasible, could include continuing to improve the sea with the water that currently flows into the sea seasonally from rivers like the New River and the Alamo River and the like. So we're focused right now on getting projects done. And I want to talk a little bit about a few projects so you're aware of what's happening. One of them is at the southern portion of the sea where the New River comes into the Salton Sea. And it's a 4,000 acre area of land. And we call it the Species Conservation Habitat Project. And it will both cover the playa with water to suppress dust and avoid that air pollution. And it will provide habitat for a range of different kinds of fish and wildlife. I'm happy to report that that project, the largest undertaken at the Salton Sea, is underway. And there is work being done, much of which with local companies, to actually construct that habitat and allow for ponds across those 4,000 acres. The southern portion of the sea was identified as an important place for a first project because our modeling, our information and data suggested that that was an area where exposed lake bed could turn into dust and pollute the environment. So we're glad to see progress on that project on the southern side of the sea. We're also very excited to be partnering with the Salton Sea Authority and the County of Riverside, who are leading the effort to develop a North Lake pilot project, which would provide for a portion of the northern portion of the Salton Sea to be inundated This pilot project would be 160 acres in size, and helped understand how that works potentially for a much larger project. We're very focused in working with our partners to bring that online soon. I'm also very glad to announce progress on an effort at Desert Shores to bring water back into the Keys at Desert Shores, which will be very important for that community. And we're very grateful for one federal agency, the Bureau of Reclamation, that has recently identified some significant funding for that project to allow it to move forward. We're also working to improve our engagement with community members, with groups like yours, and with community residents like you. I'll be very honest, for a long time, the state didn't do hardly anything at the Salton Sea. And as we began to work on projects, we didn't listen enough to local communities and local residents. We're working to improve that, and this meeting is one example, but it is a journey, and we will continue to improve how we can get ideas and suggestions from community leaders and share information about what's happening. I'll end by welcoming some people to our team that I'm very excited about, because they will help us improve all of the work that we do at the sea. You met Moises Moreno Rivera at the beginning of our discussion today. He and I work together at the same agency. We have also welcomed Geneva E.B. Thompson, who is our new Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs. She's a member of the Cherokee Nation and will help us build partnerships with tribal governments and communities, including at and around the Salton Sea. I'm so excited to announce today the addition of Miguel Hernandez on the Salton Sea team, actually at the sea. You may know Miguel from his work at Comité Cívico de Valle, and Miguel is going to be leading the communications and public affairs for all of this work at the sea. I'm also really glad to share with you that our one of the departments that's driving this work, the Department of Water Resources, which I mentioned, has a new leader overseeing the Salton Sea team named James Newcomb, who is known as a real get-it-done person across this department. And so these are 3 or 4 or 5, I suppose, additions to our Salton Sea team, all focused on getting work done more effectively and more quickly, and strengthening our connection with community members that are impacted by the sea. Huge thanks to Arturo Delgado, who is our leader, who serves as Assistant Secretary for the Salton Sea, based out of Bermuda Dunes, near the sea. Arturo, you've done a wonderful job building this team, and I'm really excited about what we'll accomplish. I'll lastly say I'm looking forward to, and I think I speak for all of our team when I say we're looking forward to sharing information, and most importantly, hearing your input, your ideas, your suggestions about what's happening at the sea and what the future of the sea should look like. So thanks for this opportunity to share some words with you. And at this point, I'll turn it back to Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot, for that fantastic high-level perspective, for calling out key partnerships. Really excited about the growth of the team, and especially Miguel, who's been a key leader on the Salton Sea work for a long time on the Imperial side. So that's fantastic. Great. We will now lead into the next slide. Great. So I wanted to introduce someone who is known to many of you, Assistant Secretary for Salton Sea Policy, Arturo Delgado. Assistant Secretary Delgado has many decades of experience in managing California's natural resources. And that's all the way from the forests of far Northern California down to plants and animals in the desert region. And he's had leadership positions at multiple different agencies. In his current role, he holds everything together and he leads the team responsible for filling Salton Sea management obligations. In this role, he uses his experience and skills with extremely complex permitting processes and partnerships to continue to move things forward, including many of the projects that Secretary Crowfoot mentioned, which are great to see moving. All right, so I will now turn it over to Assistant Secretary Delgado to go through and exactly explain what the long range plan is, the timeline for the plan, the bit about the long range planning committee and current thinking about that, and ways the committee and the public can help shape the long range plan for the future of the Salton Sea. I think that's the next slide, please.
Thank you, Secretary, and thank you, Sarah, for that kind of introduction. Good afternoon. My name is Arturo Delgado, and as Sarah mentioned, I serve as the Assistant Secretary for Salton Sea Policy at the California Natural Resources Agency. Today, we formally kick off the process to develop the Salton Sea Management Program's long-range plan for the Salton Sea. During my presentation, I will overview and address the following. 1, what is the long-range plan? 2, why are we developing this plan? 3, what will influence the development of the plan? And then finally, what are the key milestones for developing the plan? Next slide, please. So what is the long-range plan? The long-range plan is a plan for the long-term restoration of the Salton Sea beyond this decade that will be developed in collaboration with input from tribal governments, local governments, and other stakeholders, including community members. The plan will include an evaluation of possible restoration alternatives to restore habitat for fish and birds, and to protect public health. Options evaluated to inform this plan will include project build-out based on projected future water inflows within the Salton Sea watershed, as well as water importation for a potential whole sea alternative if importation is found to be feasible. Our goal will be to develop a plan that restores the Salton Sea to a condition that supports a diversity of fish and wildlife dependent on the sea, protects air and water quality, and improves environmental conditions for surrounding communities. Next slide, please. So why are we developing a long-range plan? To start, the State Water Resources Control Board issued a water rights order that requires that the California Natural Resources Agency develop and submit a long-range plan by December of 2022. The Fish and Game Code also requires the development of a preferred alternative for restoration of the sea to include consideration of strategies for controlling salinity, creating and restoring habitat, and evaluating different shoreline elevations and surface area configurations. These configurations must consider a range of inflow conditions and must also include criteria for selecting and evaluating alternatives. The long-range plan is needed to provide a path forward for long-term restoration and management of the sea beyond the Salton Sea Management Program's 10-year plan that is now underway. We know the Salton Sea is a dynamic environment and will continue to change beyond 2028. The long-range plan will allow the state to plan for the needs of the region and communicate this broadly to bring resources and support and advance critical next steps for plan implementation, such as environmental compliance and permitting, and securing land access and a water supply. Next slide, please. So what will influence the development of the plan? There will be multiple inputs to help shape the development of the long-range plan. The state has entered into a contract with the University of California, Santa Cruz to facilitate the establishment of an expert independent review panel that will conduct a feasibility study of water importation strategies for the Salton Sea. The outcome of this study will determine the technical, environmental, and economic feasibility of water importation or a potential whole sea alternative. While the independent review panel is conducting its evaluation of water importation concepts, the California Natural Resources Agency will reconvene the Long-Range Planning Committee to assist the state with the evaluation of alternatives that do not include water importation, including review of the previously developed Salton Sea Ecosystem Restoration Program. In addition, community engagement meetings will be held to receive feedback and comments throughout the development of the plan. The feedback will be considered in a meaningful way to help inform plan development. Next slide, please. As I just mentioned, the California Natural Resources Agency will be reconvening the Long Range Committee. Starting this fall, the committee will meet at least once every 2 to 3 months through December of 2022. The committee will submit recommendations to the Resources Agency to assist in development of the long-range plan. The committee may also assist with outreach and engagement of community members and stakeholders to help solicit feedback and comments to inform plan development. Committee representation will consist of a broad range of stakeholders. Next slide, please. Potential long-range planning committee members may include tribal governments, community representatives, local governments, non-governmental organizations such as conservation, community, and recreational groups, major landowners, water and air districts, agriculture, geothermal development, and federal and state agencies. At this time, we would like to receive your feedback and input on the potential list of members and the number of members that should comprise the planning committee. I will now turn it over to Joanne to conduct a polling.
Next slide, please. So to get a better sense of how we can best develop the committee, we have 2 more poll questions. So our first question is, what other groups could be added to improve the long range planning committee? And if we go to the next slide, we'll start seeing some of the results that are trickling in. Okay, so we have putting community members on these planning committees. So not only relying on NGOs, pulling from local nonprofit orgs, Army Corps of Engineers, local constituents, the Ecomedia Compass, we have state parks, Cabazon Band of Mission Indians, Imperial Valley Wellness Foundation, and I think we can scroll down to see any others that are coming in.
Joanne, it's not letting me scroll this actual page.
Okay, so let's see what I can read from here. We have Latino Outdoors, Outdoor Afro, BIPOC, I'm guessing there's another name after, but we are capturing all of these. So we have these all saved separately. So if we can't see them on the screen right now, we're able to access them after. So we can always review these and take your options and note them down after. But these are just a couple of the ones we've received so far. We'll give a couple more seconds, so just please continue sending those in, even if we can't see them at the moment. Okay. And we know we have a couple more. We have 36 responses, so I'm glad we're able to get a couple of suggestions, and we can go ahead and go to the next poll question. Our next poll question is, to keep members productive while being inclusive, how many members do you think should serve on the long range planning committee? So option A is 10 or less, B 10 to 20, C 20 to 30, or D more than 30 committee members. Sorry. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see the results. Okay, so it seems we're leaning towards 10 or less members, followed by 10 to 20, And we'll also give a couple more seconds for folks to participate. Okay, there we go. Okay, so still 10 or less, tying up with 10 to 20. Seems like folks don't maybe want the group to be larger than 30. Okay, to the 20. I'm just gonna give it 5 more seconds. Okay, so then it seems there's a preference for 10 to 20 members. And then, okay, with that, I will send it back to Arturo.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Joanny, and thanks to everyone for your input on the poll questions. Really interesting to see the results. So this slide, really kind of the last question here. So when are we going to develop the long range plan and what are the next steps? So to date, substantial pre-planning work has been completed over the last several months, laying the groundwork for this week's community meetings, which officially starts our public engagement process to develop the long range plan. This chart provides an overview schedule for developing the plan, including evaluation of water importation and non-importation alternatives, and the approximate number and dates of committee and public meetings that will be held through the end of 2022. As mentioned earlier, and as shown in the long range plan development timeline, which is the top timeline on the chart, the state will reconvene the long range planning committee over the next couple of months and hold a kickoff meeting this November, after which the committee will meet at least once every 2 to 3 months through December of 2022. At the first committee meeting, the team will present a detailed set of activities to complete the long range plan on time. The committee will provide feedback on this approach that will guide plan development. Public meetings will also be held approximately every 2 to 3 months in between committee meetings to provide opportunities for public feedback and comments. Between now and next summer, while the independent review panel is conducting the feasibility study of water importation, the state team with participation and input from the committee and public will evaluate restoration strategies that do not include water importation and that could be constructed using projected future water inflows within the Salton Sea watershed. At the conclusion of the panel's feasibility study next summer, a final report will be submitted to the state that will include the panel's findings and recommendations. By the summer of 2022, it is expected that both the evaluations of water importation and non-importation restoration strategies will be completed and work will commence to consider the results of the evaluations and finalize the long-range plan for submittal to the State Water Board by December 2022. In closing, it is my hope that through this collaborative process over the next 16 months, working in partnership with tribal governments, local governments, stakeholders, and community members, that we will be able to develop a long-range plan that creates a shared vision for the future of the Salton Sea. This concludes my portion of the presentation, and I will now hand the meeting back over to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Delgado, and for laying out the information and process towards a shared vision. I know there's a lot here in this timeline, so I encourage folks when they go to the question and answer section to ask any follow-up questions they might have. Next slide, please. Great. So Assistant Secretary Delgado discussed the long-range plan. As you saw in this timeline, simultaneously, there is a independent review panel, which will be reviewing water importation plans. So I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Raimundo Siri. Dr. Suri is a professor and chair of the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Temple University. And he's the founding member of Temple's National Science Foundation funded Water and Energy Technology Center, which has the cool acronym WET. Dr. Suri has led a lot of research efforts over the years around water technology and engineering in academic context and others. So he has great experience with stakeholder groups, taking their input and working with coalitions. He also has deep experience in water quality and purification. He has studied extensively traditional and new water treatment processes and pollutants and published many research papers on that issue. His work on water quality and treatment processes has resulted in building wastewater treatment facilities at industrial sites throughout the world. Dr. Suri also has extensive experience working with academic and non-academic stakeholders. As the chair of the independent review panel, his duties include the selection of panel nominees, leading the drafting of reports that come out of that panel, setting agendas and managing their meetings, and supervising deliberations on the behalf of the panel. We really look forward to having him lead a robust science-based process as chair of the independent review panel. And I'm pleased to turn over the presentation to him to explain more about the panel, the role, and the process for reviewing water importation processes. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Sarah. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rominder Suri, and it's my pleasure and honor to be here today virtually and to participate in this meeting. And as Sarah was saying, that I will give you a little overview about the panel, the independent panel that we are setting up, and the kind of work that we will be doing, and how we could engage more with you, and what our scope of work and deliverables would be. So in this independent panel, there'll be experts having experience in different aspects that would be needed as we review the submissions that we receive. So as I'm sure you're aware that there have been a number of submissions on the importation aspects for the restoration of the sea. And we opened the call for a little bit more time till, I think, October 12th to see if there can be any more ideas in case you have, or entities have ideas that we should consider, as well as entities who submitted their ideas previously would like to add to those or add more information. So once we have these submissions, we will be evaluating those, and of course we would need expertise to do so. So on the panel, the folks would be covering a wide range of expertise, and here are some key ones that are listed on this slide. So they'll have experience in designing and building large-scale water infrastructure from the technology perspective and scientific perspective. While designing and constructing these systems is important, but also important is how to operate and manage. So, and especially for their long-term robustness of these types of projects. So we'll be looking at the submissions from those aspects as well. And then, of course, there are water and environmental laws and the permitting issues. So we'll have that expertise on hand as well. And a very important component that Secretary Wade Crowfoot also highlighted is the public engagement and communication. And we would welcome participation from the stakeholders. And as I mentioned, we've already increased the submission period, and then I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then, of course, the information which is there, which is received, how to assess that and analyze the data, so that aspect would be there as well. If we go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the panel members have been voted for their expertise, for their experience, and also for any conflict of interest aspects. And in addition to the expertise that the panel members will collectively bring to the table, we'll also have support from experts at University of California, Santa Cruz, for example, the economists or scientists which are there on their team. Kennedy Jenks Consulting Company, which is a very prominent consulting firm, which has a lot of experts in-house, and they could bring those types of expertise that would be needed. And in addition, if we need any other specialized expertise, we have the opportunity to hire those consultants as well. So I think collectively, we'll have not only a wide diversity of expertise, but also a significant depth in the expertise as we review and assess the different submissions that we receive. Next slide, please. No. So as I was mentioning, that the primary role is to review, assess the submissions, and then provide a report with our recommendations to the solvency management program. And to do that, we'll be coming up with the evaluation criteria, and we'll review those proposals against those criteria and rank them. And these evaluation criteria would be, again, very diverse, of course, from the technological perspective, and then the practical feasibility of the project, of course, the cost, and then very importantly, the impact it will have on public health, on improving the environmental health, the economic impacts that it will have in the region, and at the same time, the risks associated with those projects and the mitigation strategies, plus, of course, the long-term viability of those projects. So the panel will be formulating those criteria and then for our review process. All right, next slide, please. So far, as you probably know, we have received 11 submissions and concepts, and we have solicited for any additional ideas that anyone would have. At the same time, if the original submitters have additional information or would like to make any changes, there is an opportunity to do so, and we have a date of October 12th. So there is ample time to provide us with more information if you'd like. Next slide, please. So the deliverables from the panel, there will be 2 deliverables, 2 report outs. The first one, we're calling it as a screening report. So the submissions that we get initially, we will review those it'll be more of a screening process against the criteria that we come up with, and see which one of the submissions seem more feasible, and those will be evaluated further. And then we'll do a more deeper evaluation of those proposals. Next slide, please. And the second report out is a feasibility analysis and summary report, including our recommendations. So the proposals that make through the first screening will do a more detailed evaluation and provide our assessment and our recommendations. And of course, our evaluation criteria and the process that we undertake, we will be describing in that report. So that report would be submitted around the middle of next year. Right. Next slide, please. Right. So we have set up an email, and if anybody would like to share their thoughts, ideas, please do so. I personally encourage you to do that, and you can send your comments to this email, and the program coordinator will then route those comments to the individuals or the panel as appropriate. And we will be holding a public meeting in fall. The panel is planning on traveling to the Salton Sea region in early November, and hopefully we'll get a chance to meet with you and hear more from you. And then in addition to that, we will be having meetings like this one more next year, as Assistant Secretary Arturo Delgado was mentioning, having meetings every 2 to 3 months next year. So I guess there will be plenty of opportunities of interaction, and in those meetings, I would be happy to provide you with updates on the progress that we make in the panel, as well as hear your comments. So I think Sarah, could go to the next slide, please. All right, so I may pass the baton back to Sarah.
Great. Thank you. That was very incredibly helpful. And I know there will be a lot of questions about this later. So great to have your leadership and expertise on this.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So now I wanted to probably reintroduce myself for the third time. As mentioned, I'm with a group called Better World Group Advisors. And Resources Agency reached out to my company a few months ago to help think through how facilities and infrastructure improvements and other benefits for communities at the Salton Sea could fit into Salton Sea management and other ongoing programs in the area. So our company does a lot of things in the environmental policy and coalition building space, which is where I work in my expertise, but our leadership has many decades of experience in negotiating and creating binding community benefits agreements and working in other forms with communities to ensure that infrastructure projects create long-standing sustainable benefits for the communities where they are placed in both California and Oregon. So we're bringing both sides of that expertise to this project. I also want to start by acknowledging first off, thanking CNRA for reaching out, and also acknowledging that we are here today at all because of the organizing and activism by communities at the sea, as well as the community-based organizations on both sides of Riverside of Imperial County. I think there is a need for this process to be driven by community values, and groups and community members have said that for a long time, and this is really the product of that work. I also wanted to note that though that work and that activism and that advocacy has been ongoing for many years, this is early in our engagement. So we don't really have all the answers, or really many of them yet. And other than knowing that to be successful, this work has to occur in partnership and be led by communities and community-based organizations. Next slide, please. Great. So I wanted to lay out some of the core starting points and values as we start this effort. And the first is that Salton Sea communities are varied with different values, knowledge, priorities, and needs. There isn't a single Salton Sea community. Each has incredibly different culture, activism, multi-generational organizing, and some have been focused on community amenities, some are thinking in different ways. And so starting from that point. Also, Salton Sea management projects are really different. As Secretary Crowfoot mentioned, there's all kinds of projects happening. The Desert Shores Project, which is very exciting, efforts in Riverside County led by the Salton Sea Authority and Supervisor Perez. And there's no one-fit-all amenity that fits into these projects. And the third, I think, most important value that's driving the process is that the community amenities process must be driven by community members themselves. That's who understand what their community needs, what their values are, and that it is this knowledge that should influence and guide this process. Next slide, please. All right, so as mentioned before, we want to recognize that this is a true partnership and will be. It is BWG's role to support surface and try to implement this work, and that it will be undertaken in full partnership with stakeholders. We also want to value, respect, and build on previous efforts, of which there are numerous. And with that, one of the thinkings is, community members have already put a lot of time into identifying what they want in some regions of the sea, and we want to respect that input. Also, that in all aspects of Salton Sea planning, community needs and values must be considered, and that should be considered at the front end. And then I want to note, some amenities might fit easily into Salton Sea management programs, and others might not be such an easy fit and not fit within the scope. And these may require other funding sources or permitting. Next slide, please. Great. So I just wanted to give an overview of where we are in this process. So again, we've been engaged to help move this forward and have this be an integral part of Salton Sea and other planning. We have been interviewing key stakeholders at the sea over the last month or so, and asking about community benefits as well as other things. And in that process, identifying other folks to interview, other sources of comments from community members to review. And at this point are working to start developing a community amenities working group. And that hasn't started yet, but I will note, this is really the fun part of the job. And again, I'm so excited and honored to be a part of this. Through that interview process, I think the enthusiasm and eagerness to work on this and to provide benefits and be led by communities at the sea came up in every conversation I've had so far. Really, particularly with local government, Salton Sea Authority, I think there is broad support for this and excitement for making it happen. And so I'm really excited to be part of that partnership. I probably haven't interviewed very many, as many people as I needed to. So if you would like more information or thoughts on engagement, ideas for work that's been done so far that should be incorporated, other ideas, please do reach out to me via email. And that email address is there. All right, so next we have two questions that will kind of help inform this. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Joanne.
So we have two questions. The first one is going to be a ranking question. So it's what types of facilities would improve your experience at the Salton Sea and benefit your community? And you will have the option to rank these 4: parks, walking and bike trails, bird watching areas, boating, and water access. So you'll be able to rank either all 4 or just your top 1 or 2. So if we go, there we go to the next slide. Okay, so currently walking and bike trails, parks just came up. Okay. Let's see, parks and walking and bike trails are tying. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay, so it looks like walking and bike trails came in first place, followed by parks, then boating. Oh, actually, bird watching just came up, and followed by boating and water access. So it seems like those two are kind of tying. And this is really interesting to see. Let's go to the next question, which is just a follow-up to this first one. So what other types of facilities or improvements would benefit you or your community experience at the Salton Sea? So anything we might have missed in that previous poll, this will be an open-ended question. So you can just send in any suggestions you have there. Let's see, those are generating now. We have fishing, broadband access, zip lining, transit, boating and fishing, science center, bus, historic panels, food, concert venue for the millennials, hunting opportunities, water sports. And then I think we still don't have the ability to scroll, but I'm sure a couple more are coming in. And so we will be able to review the rest later, but these are very interesting. Yes to concert venues. These are great. Okay, thank you all. I'll turn it back to Sarah.
Great. Well, thank you again. Again, this is both the middle and the start of this journey, to put it in Secretary Crowfoot's metaphor earlier. So this is really exciting, and clearly this is not going to be the only opportunity at all to get feedback in multiple different forms and ways that reach community members in all the ways. But I also was interested in that. Great. Okay, so now we are going to move into the Q&A section and comments section of our meeting. So a few starting points. I think we have in here instructions on how to participate with your comment or questions. So if you are on the webinar, you can use the raise hand button or the Q&A feature. If you are on the phone, you can press line 2. And if you are on Facebook Live, write in the comment. So a few reminders. Just first off, given the folks we have available today, questions that are really tied to their presentations will be helpful, but also recognizing, folks have need an opportunity to speak. Then the second is to please speak slowly, as we have 2 translators, and we want everyone to have the benefit of participants' comments and questions. Again, to be respectful of everyone's time and give them a chance, we have 3 minutes per person for either questions or comments. So in terms of the logistics of taking the questions, we will first start with the phone line, then move to Zoom webinar users, and then Facebook Live. Questions and answers are going to be addressed in the order they are received. And essentially, I am just going to be a conduit, and I'm going to try to direct the question when they come up to the person, one of our many experts for today, to best answer the questions, unless it's on community amenities, in which case I'll probably answer it myself. Great. And I think we can get going.
All right, the first hand raised is Mark Gran. Mark, you should be able to mute yourself and make comment. Mark, you have your hand raised and you should be able to unmute yourself now. You appear to be unmuted, Mark. Mark may be having some technical issues. Don't hear him, but he is unmuted. So Mark, will leave your hand raised and we'll move to the next.
Oh, can you hear me?
Can hear you now, Mark.
Okay, yeah, no, I must have accidentally hit the hand because I had no comment.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, thank you.
The next hand raised is Ronald Spears. Ronald, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, again.
Yeah, I want to thank all of you for putting on the conference. Ron Spears, and I'm president of the Bahia Del Mar Property Owners Association. And I'd like to speak, I'm not really speaking on behalf of them, but I'd like to speak in relation to them. As everybody knows, our community has been pretty active at Desert Shores with the Channel Restoration Project. And we want to thank everybody, especially Assistant Secretary Arturo Delgado and Wade Crowfoot, and of course, Supervisor Ryan Kelly and the Bureau of Reclamation for being involved and moving this project forward. My first question, I think, is to Sarah, is we would like to see about being a participating member on your long-range planning committee, if that is feasible. Since we do have a pretty cohesive unit there out at Desert Shores, we'd like to be one of the representatives for the long-range planning project. And then just a quick question to Assistant Secretary Arturo Delgado is if he can give any input as to the progress of the Desert Shores Channel Restoration Project in regards to the negotiations between the Salton Sea Authority and the consulting firms, I assume Tetra Tech and Cardno, at least Tetra Tech that I know of, as to how that is progressing in moving the project forward once the funds are in place from the Bureau of Reclamation. And those are my 2 questions.
I can answer the first quickly. So that's a yes. That sounds great. And I've been really excited to hear about this project from Supervisor Kelly and Eco Media Compass. So please shoot an email. I would love to connect.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and address the second question. Yeah, hi Ron, good to hear your voice. Yeah, so I think we're making good progress. We are having monthly meetings with Imperial County, Supervisor Kelly, Salton Sea Authority.
It looks like Arturo may have froze. I don't know if he lost his connection completely but
Our schedule right now is to complete that environmental document, at least have a draft EA that we plan to release later this fall. And then with a goal of having a completed NEPA document, or having the Corps have a completed NEPA document by the first quarter of next year. At the same time, Imperial County is taking the lead on completing the compliance under the California Environmental Quality Act, and also working to secure permits. So at this point in time, the plan is to have work on getting the environmental compliance and permitting completed over the course of this year, and also secure the funding. The Salton Sea Authority is working with the Bureau of Reclamation to enter into a funding agreement. We expect that to be in place by later this fall. And kind of with that in mind, the goal will be to have the compliance, the permitting, the funding in place to be positioned to start the project this next spring.
okay, next hand raised is Carrie Morrison. Carrie, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi all, my name is Kerry Morrison. I'm the Executive Director of the Eco Media Compass, nonprofit at the Salton Sea. Our team has been working on support for localized restoration efforts, as well as the long-range plan for about a decade. We have a couple questions. Well, I would like to first echo a support for what Ron Spear said. We own the land where the berm will be going in, and anything that we can do to help, we'd like to help support that. We do have the Community Engineering Corps based out of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo working on some of the engineering documents for this, and we've signed those this week, and that should be in progress. We have a couple questions about the long-range plan, and we'd like to know, what is the intent of the SSMP to recommend a long-term plan for funding when you decide on a plan? Are you going to be making a request to the legislature and the government to actually fund this? So that's number one. How do we actually pay for this? There are some projects I understand that had built-in funding mechanisms, so it would cost the state's current coffers nothing, but is there anything written down that you actually have to fund something? Another question is, what is the process for establishing the long-range planning committee? Is there a standardized process? Is it kind of a whoever reaches out and is most excited? Is there a qualification to be on it, or just people really need to like the sea? How does that work out? And then one last question is, there had been a preferred alternative as water import, or another alternative or another option you mentioned for the long range plan based on future water inflow figures. We're realizing now that the Colorado River doesn't reach the ocean anymore unless we try really hard to let it. We're losing water in the lakes that are powering Hoover Dam. Our groundwater supplies are running out. So our team, after studying this and being in probably 100 media pieces about the Salton Sea's future, doesn't believe there's going to be enough water for significant habitat unless we have an alternative water source. So where are the figures coming from for future water inflows? Because it seems like these keep changing every year. So those are three.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you for those three questions. I'm trying to write them down, but
thank you, Sarah.
that's a lot.
I know that's a lot. We appreciate it.
So the first one, I believe, is a question for Secretary Delgado, which is, what is the funding going to be for some of these long-range planning projects? The second, perhaps Assistant Secretary Delgado could also answer, which is generally, what is the thought now about the qualifications for the long-range planning committee? And again, I mean, as you saw with the poll, that's still in progress. And then the third question, looking at water budgets in the future for the sea, I would perhaps ask Bill or Sujoy with Tetra Tech to answer. Does that sound good to the team?
Yeah, that makes sense, Sarah. So I guess With respect to the funding question, I think ultimately we're going to have to make progress on developing a long-range plan over the course of the next 16 months. I think once we have a long-range plan, at least from my perspective, that's really going to help us make the case, if you will, to secure additional funding, not only from the state, but also from the federal government. So we're going to have to be proactive about coming up with strategies on securing additional funds to implement whatever long-term, whatever long-range plan we develop over the course of the next 16 months. Regarding your question on reconvening the panel, we are still in process on firming up the process for reconvening the panel. That was part of the purpose of asking some of the questions that we asked today. We are considering the different groups that we asked a polling question around. I think ultimately there is overall guidance in the Fish and Game Code on who should be involved as part of this panel. We're going to rely on some of the existing statute to help inform that, but we also want to make sure that the panel size is right sized to make sure that we're getting productive, informed input to help advance development of the long range plan. So we'll have additional information over the coming couple of weeks. And so we are making progress. And I believe, Sarah, you did do some outreach, or you have been doing some outreach to kind of solicit additional feedback around what the panel composition should look like. Maybe you can share some of that also.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I think one thing that has come up over and over again is, and I think we saw this in the Mentormeter polling too, is to have representatives from the communities at the sea. And I believe Assistant Secretary Delgado put that in his slide. But you know, the communities closest to the sea have not had necessarily specific representation in the past. So recognizing that this long-term vision is going to be led by community, having more space for those representatives. And I think another thing that has come up in the interviews so far is really making sure, again, if it's guided by community. So, you know, particular, you know, if there's parties that have a commercial interest in the outcome of the sea, I believe that, you know, that's been something that's been raised by a number of people as being potentially problematic. And then I want to be respectful of time. So to the water importation water budget question, I would turn that over to Tetra Tech.
Yeah, Sarah, thanks. I can take that real quick. We do have two different scenarios that we look at of future projections of water inflows to the sea. And they have various levels of uncertainty in them. And so far, the historical past over the past 10 years or so has been tracking fairly well with the higher inflow projections, but we'll be using both of them. And then we'll also be looking at issues like climate change and things like that may affect those projections going on into the future. But you know, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. So these two scenarios that we've been working with now for a couple of years seem to be reasonable bounds on the possible future inflows. So those we'll be continuing to use, and then we'll update them as necessary.
Great. And I wanted to add one thing and apologize for taking the fact that I've controlled this, but I forgot one thing that also came up a lot in interviews was having someone with an engineering expertise on the committee. So I wanted to raise that as well. And I think we can move on to the next question.
Okay, next hand raised is Rob Simpson. Rob, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi. This actually might be a good question for Bill. My name is Rob Simpson, Director of Development for Aegis Inc. We've been working for about, 6 or 7 years at least on trying to get a mesoscale regional climate model conducted for different possibilities associated with plans to import water or not, because the do nothing option is real. Have you considered as part of the ranking criteria for evaluating the 10-year projects, what each type of project will do to the flows in the Colorado River, because alterations to this highly sensitive space for how it affects the monsoon, it's likely far more sensitive than you would suspect. And there are people that have models that are already done that just need to be modified to really look at this subject. Have you considered looking at regional climate modeling as part of the ranking criteria?
Great, thank you. And I'm going to actually turn this over to Sue Joy, who has done a lot of thinking on water and also climate.
Thanks for the question, Rob. The short answer is yes, we will be looking at both regional and broader scale climate modeling in support of the long range plan. So that is part of our intended work, and I think your comments are important and something that ought to be considered, how the projects might change the regional monsoon behavior. So, thanks.
The monsoon today, right? Okay. So yeah, I think we're ready for the next question. Thank you, James, and thanks for that comment.
Tom Sefton, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question now.
Hello, thank you everyone with the state and for putting on this presentation and opportunity to ask questions, and thank you for all the community people who are here. Really good to hear from you. And I have 3 questions for Dr. Suri. The first is, what are you generally thinking about will be the initial screening criteria applied to the various proposals that you'll see by October 12th? Second question is, one thing that seems to be potentially missing from the list of skills would be someone with knowledge of international relations and international treaties. We have 2 major options for water import. One, the Pacific Ocean, which has to go under or over a 4,000 foot mountain range, or around the top, the 2,000 foot range. Or you come from the Sea of Cortez in Mexico, which is a 30-foot elevation through the Mexicali Valley, or a 300-foot elevation between Mount Signal and the mountains to the west. So that would it would seem that import from Mexico would be a likely possibility. Will you have expertise that would be able to help with that, or will you consider bringing some engineering and international relations people from Mexico into the equation? And then the third question, those of us who have been at this for a long time are well aware that certain very powerful agencies have adamantly opposed the very concept of importing ocean water to the Salton Sea for various reasons of their own. And I'd like to know whether you've had any guidance from the state or any other agencies that are finding that ocean water import is not feasible, would be perhaps well received by certain agencies that have opposed it in the past. I thank you very much for your engagement, Dr. Suri, and I do respect your credentials and your professional reputation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And I think I want to note in the future, I would really ask participants to limit their questions to one question. I think it makes it a little bit hard to track and really give as robust and thoughtful as answers as it could otherwise be. And I know that you framed your 3 questions to Dr. Suri I think to your final point, which is whether there had been state agency, I mean, I think I would identify the fact that this panel is here at all. You know, the existence of this is really kind of looking thoughtfully at water importation processes. In the first part of your question, I would turn to Dr. Suri, which was, what are the initial screening questions and criteria for water importation projects? Your second question, which had to do with the makeup of the committee and those with international expertise, can you clarify if that's for the Long Range Planning Committee or the Water Importation Panel? Okay. Maybe he's muted. But all right, so
I allowed him to unmute himself now.
For the water importation panel. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I would turn both of those questions over to Dr. Suri. So the first, initial screening questions and criteria, and the second, membership of the panel and expertise in international relations.
Sure. So thank you, Sarah. Yes, some good questions. And regarding the evaluation criteria, we are in process of, we've started working on that, and it will be a process that will be decided by the entire panel, and as the panel is being finalized. But we will be looking at a diverse nature of criteria from, of course, the technical and practical feasibility, economic or cost feasibility aspect as well. The impact on public health, impacts on environmental health, the economic benefits to the region, as well as the risk associated with the proposed concepts. So it hasn't been finalized, it's in the process. We hope to get this done as in the next couple of weeks before the submission date of October 12th closes, so then we can, start the evaluation process for that. And in the same context, if anybody has ideas, please feel free to share with the email that I had listed earlier, and we will keep that in consideration. With regard to the international relations and treaty aspect, we, if needed, and there may be other concepts, other areas of expertise as well that we may identify as a panel that we may need as we review the multitude of proposals that we get. And as we do have the opportunity to hire consultants, independent consultants on specialized areas on which we may need the expertise.
Great, thank you. And Tom, I believe I answered your question on the agency, but just confirming that. Okay, next speaker, please.
Miguel Romero, you should be able to unmute yourself. Miguel, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Miguel Romero. I'm a field representative with the Office of Assembly Member Eduardo Garcia, covering environmental justice for the Assembly member locally in the Coachella Valley. I want to begin by thanking CNRA and Better World Group for putting together this very important forum to provide information to our community, but equally as important to hear from residents as to their priorities for the long range plan. Also want to take this opportunity to uplift the voice of our community in thanking CRA for the support in securing investments for the Salton Sea. We ask that our locals join us in continuing to advocate for the $50 million budget allocation for 2021 and $107 million for 2022 that were outlined in Governor Newsom's proposed budget, as well as the legislature's May revise. This investment is crucial for the continuation of momentum that has been built at the sea. We hope we can count on CNRA's continued support for this vital location that will be instrumental in protecting our environmental and public health. Thank you all, and we look forward to continuing being a partner in this process.
Thank you so much, Miguel. And, also thanks to the Assembly member for his incredible ongoing support and leadership for the Salton Sea and the communities that live here. Next comment, please.
Next hand raised is Pat Cooper. Pat, you should be able to unmute yourself. Okay, so Pat lowered their hand. I assume they didn't want to make comments. So Alejandro Marquez, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. So my question is, I put in the chat to translate it as well, but my question is, with about 7 years left for the 10-year plan, does the 10-year plan include only habitat restoration and recreational projects, or will the health/medical needs of the shore communities be part of the plans as well? Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the participation in the awesome graphic. I really, it's so great to have youth activism and leadership. So I'm going to take this question to being one about the 10-year plan and the projects currently in development and the role in which public health will play in those ongoing plans. And I'm going to turn that over to Yvonne and her team.
Hello, everyone. This is Yvonne Wolhoff with the California Department of Water Resources. Thank you for the question. I was just responding to the chat box for this question. So the 10-year plan identifies work for habitat and restoration projects and is response to various requirements of the state, and our funding that we received is geared towards those benefits. So we are able to utilize or use the funding we received to achieve the goals that are outlined in the 10-year plan that have been directed to our agencies to do. So when it comes to public health of the community, some of our works do impact public health in the sense that we have projects that are planned to reduce the amount of dust that is moved into the air as wind blows across the dry lake bed. So in that sense, yes, some of our projects address public health, although it's not a direct mandate of our work. I hope that answers your question. And Arturo, if you would like to add more to that question, please do so.
I think you addressed the question. Thank you, Yvonne.
Great. Next question, please, or comment.
The next hand raised is only named Quantum Consultations. So please announce yourself and unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Stephanie Martin, and I'm with Quantum Consultations based in Desert Hot Springs and the Coachella Valley Basin. I am in research and development, but I've explored all over the Coachella Valley because I love it. And I guess my main question would be proposals focused on conservation, such as basic cleanup. Is that too simpleton to focus on like an area and see and this experiment with techniques and maybe scale them up? And because I noticed a lot of stuff is focused on dust suppression and habitat creation, but I think that sometimes looking and exploring the area, it just seems like all the canals and all the berms, and I know the farming and the irrigation system is so important, but are we looking at the ecological equation in full as far as the modern Lake Leah and La Quinta, that it has invasive species, and the Whitewater River is seeming a little lower, and of course it's flowing at a rapid pace into the Salton Sea. And of course we're on all sorts of water tables here and there with natural mineral hot water springs. So I'm wondering if somehow we can add these ideas and suggestions to the table and thoughts, ideas. Thank you so much to CNRA, Dr. Suri and Sarah Friedman, Wade Crowfoot, everybody. This is so really important. I'm just such a lover of nature and animals and living species of plants, and of course, people first and foremost. And I love America and just really appreciate this. Thank you very much for this historic.
Thank you, Stephanie, for your love for the desert and the Coachella Valley and seeing the intersectionality between all of these things. I think in terms of, you know, the question of like how creative are solutions looking at, I mean, I think there's been a lot of projects underway so far. You know, I think including the Desert Shores project that was mentioned that are kind of looking holistically. I would point this question, you know, perhaps back to Sujoy of what kind of proposals that, you know, might look at the ecosystem or be a little outside the sea, which is my understanding of this question.
So I think our immediate focus in the 10-year plan is to follow the state board water right, the order which requires creation of habitat and dust suppression projects on the exposed lake bed. So we're really focused on implementing those projects at this time. And obviously, you heard about the SCH project, but there are others that are being literally on the design stage and ready to be implemented soon. And so longer term, I think the long range plan is at this stage, it's open to examine all of those concepts that go beyond the immediate perimeter of the sea to somewhat larger areas. I think that's going to be a sort of a broader process, a collective process, as Secretary Crowfoot and Assistant Secretary Delgado described. So we're definitely going to support whatever that policy emerges from this process. But in this near-term horizon, you should know that there are as a consultant, we're supporting the state team in getting as many of these projects implemented, because we have some pretty aggressive targets to be met over the next over the remaining 7 years of this 10-year plan. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Sujoy, and thank you again, Stephanie. The next question, please.
Next question is from Eric Reyes. You should be able to mute yourself, Eric. Eric, you should be able to mute yourself. It looks like Eric isn't unmuting themselves, so I'll remove their permission to talk, and we'll move to Nikolai Lakic. It looks like Nikolai, well, just a reminder that when you lower your hand, it drops you to the end of the queue, so please remember
I'm
to
here.
raise your
I'm
hand.
here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Nikolai.
Can you see me?
No, we're only doing voice.
Okay. Well, I'm pleased about, my name is Nikola Lakic. I'm graduate engineer architect. I'm one of the presenters with one of the 11 proposals for the long-term solution for the restoration of the Salton Sea. I'm very pleased with this forward right step initiated by the state, that we have independent reviewers, and I'm very pleased with Dr. Suri, and I hope that he will manage, he will chair that panel very well. I would like to suggest if he can include some architects, at least 2 or 3, or civil engineers, 2 or 3 independent, and mechanical engineers, because it's not everything just environment and measuring algae and increase of salinity. Design required, this design for restoration of the Salton Sea, in order to be properly judged, review it, it needs expertise on my peer. It say here also in this panel, the meeting provide an opportunity to share experience, meet new members, and so on. My experience so far was horrible. my proposal exists. It's comprehensive design that include not just importing seawater, but the restoration of the Salton Sea. And I'm hearing today kind of two views separating import seawater, separating from restoration of the Salton Sea. It should be together, especially if you already have design to accompany that. I'm hoping that I'm pleased that I will have opportunity in November, September, October, November, when it was. I believe next month, Val, to have opportunity to say, to make presentation, I believe 30 minutes and 15 minutes question and answer. I am looking forward for it. And I will submit also little addition. I did make, my proposal is pretty big, more than 100 slides, incorporating several technologies, including solar, hydro, geothermal, harnessing lithium from salty water. So it's comprehensive design. I separated kind of in 5 segments for easier understanding. And also I'm proposing import, not just of Rio Cortez, but Long Beach, both. And I'm pleased again with this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Nicola, for those comments and for the suggestions around adding engineers and architects in recognition of the importance of design and to the presentation later this year. Next comment or question, please.
Eric Reyes, we're going to try again and see if you want to unmute yourself.
Hello. Yeah, my question or statement comes from kind of the conflicting plans we see, just as gentleman said prior to me, that I've been involved with the Salton Sea Management Program, civic engagement, taken forever finally to have engagement with the community. Also involved locally in Imperial County through the nonprofit Los Amigos de la Comunidad with the lithium ordinance with Ryan County and the County of Imperial. They're trying to do as lithium is being developed. And I've been following, and now tomorrow I'll be on a call with the Lithium Valley through the State Commission on community engagement on lithium and the opportunity. And my question is this being coordinated with that economic development as well? I really haven't heard much about that at this point. We all want a healthy sea, and there's also opportunity for economic development. So my question there is, how is this being coordinated to make sure we can have a healthy sea that's not going to be oppressive environmentally and also create an opportunity economically with the Lithium Valley? Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for your, kind of participating in so many different community ventures and bringing up the lithium. This has been something that's come up a few different times, all these processes and how are they interconnected, particularly with the new interest in lithium. I'm going to bring this back to California Natural Resources Agency, perhaps Lisa or Arturo, to kind of explain how these different state processes are interconnected.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for the question. I think we are here at CNRA, within our agency is the California Energy Commission, and they are convening the Lithium, I guess they're calling it the Lithium Valley Blue Ribbon Commission. So we do have some representation on that, and I think that we're envisioning some level of coordination happening through that. I think this will be kind of an ongoing conversation here in the coming months as that commission continues its work. So I guess I don't have a lot of detail to answer or share right now, but I'm happy to look into that with our colleagues and share it back with a little bit more detail as we go along. I don't know, Arturo, if you had anything else to add to that.
Maybe I'll just add that, our charge, the Salton Sea Management Program, we're advancing implementation of the 10-year plan, which is constructing 30,000 acres of habitat and dust suppression projects. And at the same time, we're now in the process of developing the long-range plan. And just to kind of add a little bit more to Lisa's comments around our coordination, we, as Lisa mentioned, we do have a colleague that serves on the commission itself, and we are having internal coordination as needed as things come up.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Next question comes from somebody with just the name Eddie. Eddie, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Eddie. My name is Edward Quesada, and I'm with Waste to Water Power. Waste to Power and Water. And apologize because I'm a little bit under the weather, but I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. Is that you guys have considered into in the long-term project development of the Salton Sea, partnering with businesses and organizations? I've been in conversation with Senator Alex Padilla in regards to trying to bring in the water importation, and that's why I'm kind of like trying to see how we can best be of use to whatever plans you guys have. And I apologize because we spent a lot of time trying to see the feasibility of bringing the water from the Pacific, and it's really expensive to bring it in from the Pacific. But we want to help as far as from the business side, and teaming up with however we can help to bring water from the south if that's more feasible. So who would I direct myself, or who would be the best person for me to get in contact with?
I can help direct this question for purposes of this event. So thank you, Eddie. I'm hearing your question is, what opportunities are there for business partnerships in terms of water importation projects from Mexico? And I am going to turn that over to Dr. Story, as I believe it is pretty applicable to the water importation independent review panel.
Well, not just that, Sarah, but also the conversation is that I grew up in Brawley and I used to go fishing over there, which is why I got so involved, why I'm involved in this conversation now is that, but in order for this thing to work, it has to work for everybody, right? So economically, sustainably, working with the Department of Energy, Idaho Department of Energy, they've identified some technologies that I think would be valuable to what the goal is over there. And I would my conversation would be, okay, how can we be of help towards your goals?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I think projects that provide economic benefits and jobs are really important as part of this process. I would let me kind of turn that back then to Arturo to think about the role of partners in this process. I know there's been a lot of stakeholder work done to date.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for the question, Eddie. So I guess to start, I think you had asked who would be a good contact to communicate with. You can contact me directly, Eddie, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you about that. As we mentioned, we have two kind of concurrent pathways moving forward. One is the development of the long-range plan, which we're launching that today. And the second is implementing the 10-year plan, which includes the 30,000 acres of habitat and dust suppression projects. I think, as far as opportunities for businesses to get involved, we have our regular kind of bureaucratic processes within the state of California. If we need a type of service, we'll put out a request for proposals. So I think with respect to the projects that we're implementing as part of the 10-year plan, as we have service needs or support needs, we'll be reaching out to various for those type of services. For me, the first step as part of the developing the long range plan and opportunities there to partner with various businesses. I think the first step is really to work on developing the plan and see where we land here over the next 16 months. And I think as we kind of go through that process, we'll be able to identify opportunities to partner with businesses. In the meantime, if you would like to have additional conversations around this topic, I'll be more than happy to schedule some time to chat with you.
Great, thank you, Arturo. I think we're on to the next speaker, James.
Yep, next hand raised is Nathan White. Nathan, you should be able to mute yourself.
Hey, thanks so much for everyone. Yeah, Eddie, we're looking for people to join our team too. So yeah, our team is Aegis Inc. and we're a professional project management team. We're going to be resubmitting to the water import project as well. It's nice to meet you, Dr. Suri. Thanks for joining this effort. You know, it took a few presentations to the Long Range Planning Committee to get the RFI started. So, you know, things take time through, like Mr. Arturo Delgado said, the bureaucracy of just the process. So I'll make my comments or questions short. I wanted to thank everybody for, you know, this open platform. It's really great to hear engagement and taking in public comment and engaging with the community and stakeholders. The question that I have, and it's kind of in two parts, the criteria for submittals to the preferred alternative projects through the long range planning group. So, you know, what type of projects, and I like that there was mention of projects outside the confines of the shoreline of the Salton Sea, you know, not just dust mitigation projects. So that's really exciting. But what is going to be the submittal criteria for those? What is the process for applying and submitting projects to that group? And I know this is all at the beginning stages. So, you know, I can assume that the answer is going to be information will be coming soon, and that's great. The other question that I had, and it's kind of part of the current 10-year plan, and it's kind of mentioned in what several of the community members mentioned, you know, there's 7 years left in the 10-year plan. The two big projects have been in the process since 2012. You know, so 9 years plus 7 years. What can be done to get smaller projects on the ground faster? You know, what other dust mitigation projects can be implemented quickly? You know, there's been mention of desert shores. Can there be other projects like that at the Riviera Keys? Can there be a process? And I mention it at every meeting. Is there a process for smaller grants for smaller property owners to do dust mitigation on the shoreline? And I know that's outside of the 10-year plan environmental assessments, but there's small companies that would be very interested in doing tree planting or other dust mitigation strategies. How would those go about reviewing outside of the long range planning group? Is there a conduit for the current 10-year plan, since we have 7 years, to look at projects like that? And could a process be developed around it? So thanks for everybody's help. Thanks for everybody's listening and great work. There's a lot of momentum, so I appreciate everybody's time.
Great, thank you so much for your time and thoughtfulness. So I heard your first question is, what is the submittal criteria for long range projects that might be outside of the water importation panel? And I think you were correct that information will be coming soon as those questions are raised. So thank you for your patience with that. And your second question is, what can be done to get smaller projects, dust mitigation projects, maybe similar to what's being piloted in desert shores? And I'm going to turn that over to Yvonne to either answer directly or to send to someone else on the team who may be more involved in dust mitigation projects.
So I can answer the question at a high level. Thank you for the question. So currently, yes, there are things that can be done to implement dust suppression projects at the sea now. There's work underway looking at different areas of the sea and the unique aspects of the exposed lake bed around the sea to reduce the amount of dust that can get moved into the air as wind crosses the dry lake bed. So the state is currently working on that. We have projects underway around the sea. Currently, we're working on the west side of the sea, looking at a few sites on U.S. Bureau of Reclamation land, and those are dust suppression projects. As far as getting grants to do other types of projects, I am going to move that question over to Arturo. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any grants that are available through the state, but I do not know if there's any available from our federal partners.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne. And Nathan, thank you for the question. Yeah, so as you know, we're in the midst of preparing the environmental assessment under NEPA for the entire 10-year plan. My expectation is that once we complete that NEPA document, that's going to provide comprehensive NEPA compliance, National Environmental Policy Act compliance for our 10-year plan, which will enable expedite project implementation on federal lands and also expedite federal permitting on for those projects. Currently, we have set aside about $20 million to cover habitat and dust suppression projects. And as Yvonne just mentioned, we do have several projects in the works. I'm hoping here in the next few weeks, we'll be able to announce a pretty significant project. That's a vegetation enhancement project on USBR lands. In addition to that, we also have the North Lake Demonstration Project. And as you know, the Desert Shores Channel Restoration Project. And then we're also working closely with Audubon on their proposal to implement a project at Bombay Beach to do wetland restoration. So there are several projects in the project pipeline. And we hope through this NEPA process, we'll be able to identify kind of the comprehensive pipeline of projects that by the end of this year, beginning of next year. And at that point in time, I think there'll be a lot more clarity on how we're going to get to 30,000 acres over the next 7 years.
Great. Thank you, Yvonne and Arturo. Next question, please, or comment.
Next hand raised is Kim Floyd. Kim, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, Kim Floyd. I live in Palm Desert, and I'm concerned about the long-term planning committee being able to move forward effectively before we have an idea where we're going with this water importation question. And related to the water importation question, I wondered if the review panel will go outside, in terms of its recommendations, go outside of the 11 plus whatever comes in by October 12. I have heard discussions that there needs to be some kind of combination of efforts, including some elements of more than one of the 11 proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. So I heard two questions. One is, a questions/concern about the intersection of the long range plan committee and the water importation panel timeline. And then the interplay between those two. So I would give the first part to Sujoy, who is working on developing the long range plan. And then the second question was, will there be more, will the water importation panel look outside of what is submitted or combine those? And I would offer that second question to Dr. Story.
Sarah, could you repeat that first question?
So the first question I think Kim raised, and I think this came up a bit in the timeline, but it's really hard to put in places, is how are the two processes, the development of the long range plan and the water importation panel, which are happening simultaneously, how will they intersect given that they're happening at the same time? Is that correct, Kim?
Yeah, I think I can answer that. There are flow scenarios, as we described in an earlier response to an earlier question and also in the presentation. There are existing flow scenarios for the flows that are expected to be available within the Salton Sea watershed. And we can plan on project concepts based on just that limited flow. And so one part, and again, this is in the interest of time and efficiency for the overall long range plan. So one part of the state team is really focusing on evaluating those projects that are based on existing available water resources within the watershed without import. And as some of you know, many of those concepts have been developed in earlier efforts going back 2 decades or more. And so this isn't reinventing those concepts, but really getting them up to date with current conditions and preparing an assessment for the long range plan that's sort of a one track, which is assuming the limited water resources. And then there will be certain projects that rise to the top, certain concepts that rise to the top through that analysis. And separately, the independent panel will make its own assessment of projects without the limit of the watershed water resources, with considering imports. And so the task in the last few months of 2022 will be to integrate those concepts and to come up with a recommendation that'll go into the long range plan. So these things could be done in sequence, but again, in the interest of time and to be efficient, we're doing them in parallel.
Yeah, this is Bill Brown. I can add also that at that point, we'll be able to look at different components and meld together, sort of the best concepts to come up with recommendations for our long-term thing. So it's not going to be stovepipe type thing. It's going to have to, we're going to have to look at lots of different components and see how they all fit together.
Great. And then I think the second part of the question would hybrid projects be considered, or projects that are outside of those submitted? And I would ask Dr. Suri to answer that.
Well, Sarah, that's basically what I'm saying.
Okay.
There will be a hybrid of what comes out of the panel. What's been looked at in the past, dozens and dozens of things have been looked at in the past. So it's going to be a process of combining it all to come up with hybrid projects that provide the best solutions.
Great, thanks. I think next question or comment.
Okay. John Hernandez, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, John Hernandez, Brawley. I just want to comment or piggyback on Tom Sefton's question regarding the way I understood it, whether or not the seriousness of the long-term plan would include an importation from Mexico. And in view of that, that I certainly support that in view of what's happening across the state and the Colorado River, which is what serves us in Mexico, and we're both suffering, and so I think it's opportune that any projects that would be beneficial to both sides of the border would be something that both governments would entertain. At the lowest level, we're suffering. Fish, fowl, and people are suffering at the lowest level death. But these talks need to be taken to the highest level because it's going to require presidential permits and presidential declarations. And what I heard about engaging with the International Water and Boundary Commission, engaging with the Border 2025 and the United States Environmental Protection Agency that's entrusted with the issues on the border relating to water and energy. And also, I think with the good relations that now appear to be ongoing with Mexico and President Manuel López Obrador. And 3 weeks ago, we got a former secretary of the United States Department of Interior appointed as ambassador to Mexico, which is Ken Salazar. He's now the ambassador to Mexico. So I think that if Wade is still with us, and or if he's not, that certainly the undersecretary Arturo could start those conversations and start reaching out to the highest levels of government, if in fact this is going to be something that's going to be taken seriously, if something that's going to be workable, and not waste our time on that side again for another 20, 30, 40 years, as opposed to something that we need now at a quicker pace. So thank you very much for allowing me to make my comment, and good work to everyone. And this seems to be picking up some solid ground. And congratulations to Arturo and his new team. And certainly, we're here to support the success and the life at the Salton Sea and for the community. Thank you.
Thank you for you and your work, John. I think next question, please.
Chuck Parker, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi, thank you. The first thing I wanted to do was to make a suggestion to Dr. Suri that he include some experts from Mexico on the panel, since all of the 11 proposals that were submitted before involve bringing water from Mexico. I think it would be a good way of opening doors and getting a perspective on from their side regarding the project. The second comment I wanted to make was that I found the comments from Tetra Tech just now about the hybridization of projects very confusing and unclear. I wanted to suggest to Dr. Suri, and I don't want to hear from Tetra Tech again, that the evaluation of water import would have to include an evaluation of the other popular solution, the perimeter lake, the one that's been proposed for about 13 years by officials in the Salton Sea arena. Because I don't see how you can evaluate water import unless you also compare it to what the other officials want to do if we decide, or if you decide, that water import isn't going to work, because it's a pretty horrible solution in my opinion, and also in the opinion of many other people. And I also finally wanted to suggest that there be representatives, at least one from the cities of the Coachella Valley, on the Long Range Planning Committee. They've been very active on this issue. They've offered their support. All of them unanimously support bringing water in from Mexico. And it's a shame that they've been excluded from the engagement on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, for your comment. So I heard two comments. One was a suggestion to include experts from Mexico on the water importation panel, because so many of the proposals are cross-border, and also a suggestion to add Coachella Valley cities to the Long Range Planning Committee. And I think that's a great suggestion. And then I'm going to, the question I heard for Dr. Suri was, how will water importation projects be compared to non-water importation project alternatives? Like, will there be an alternatives analysis, and specifically one with NC solutions? So I would turn that over to Dr. Suri. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the comments and question, and we'll consider your suggestion of that you made on the panel composition. With regard to the evaluation of the concepts, so what our charge right now is to evaluate the submissions that have been received, and there can be other ideas out there which, if they were not submitted, there is an opportunity to submit those, and in that view we extended the call to October 12th, and also the opportunity for folks who have, or entities who have submitted, to make a presentation. Unless the charge of the panel is changed at this point, I'd say that we'll be evaluating and providing our recommendations on the proposals or the concepts that get submitted dealing with the importation aspects.
Thank you, Dr.
Sarah, I was just going to add, so just to kind of build off what Dr. Suri just mentioned, they're charged with evaluating water importation concepts. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we're going to reconvene the long range committee with public input to evaluate those alternatives that do not include water importation. And then next summer, we expect to have those evaluations complete, both the water importation evaluation as well as those alternatives that do not include water importation. And kind of specifically, from my perspective, we will be looking at the preferred alternative that was developed in 2007 and the range of alternatives that were developed by, at the time, the Salton Sea Ecosystem Restoration Program, as well as other alternatives that were developed since then. As an example, the preferred, the perimeter lake. So that's what that's the way that we're planning to proceed at this point in time. And then by next summer, we should have the evaluations complete and we will consider the outcome of those evaluations.
Thank you for that addition.
Okay, the next hand raised is Nilda Ruiz. Nilda, you should be able to mute yourself.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Nilda Ruiz. I am a project manager with Alianza Coachella Valley. I have a couple of comments. First, it is likely you're looking at existing partners, academics, professionals, etc., for the selection of the Long Range Planning Committee, but I would strongly recommend including community members. While I understand you may be unsure as to who from the community to include in the committee, you can reach out to local community organizations for nominations, per se. We need to include community members and their lived experiences are directly involved when planning the future of the Salton Sea. Second, in reference to the long range plan coming out in December 2022, I strongly encourage making sure it is accessible to community members, not just by providing copies, digital and physical, but also providing comprehensive summaries for community members that may not be well versed in the technical language that often is present in these reports. Third, I'm really glad you asked about facilities that can be brought to the Salton Sea. However, please ensure that these facilities will be accessible to community members. Even those that live in neighboring Salton Sea communities, particularly youth, may not have transportation to reach the destinations where these facilities are available. So please keep in mind that, that transportation will be available to and from when designing these facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing up the issues of transportation equity as well as language and clarity of terms.
Next hand raised is Gerald. Gerald, you should be able to mute yourself.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
My name's Gerald Katz. I've worked in sustainable development. I was with utilities for almost 30 years. And I got interested 10 years ago at the Salton Sea because all the problems, but all the potential assets and resources with the energy available. And when I saw the concept of the sea-to-sea import, and then saw that Israel and Jordan are looking at the same thing where they desalinate the water, produce water for hundreds of thousands of people, and then have the remaining water to replenish. Well, this is the Dead Sea, it's a different thing, but extracting, that's the biggest industry at the Dead Sea, is extracting, is just taking the water, letting it evaporate, having valuable salts. And like the salt industry is a big industry, but they're just looking narrowly at getting the salt. If we had desalination, that would recover minerals and produce water with renewable energy, the geothermal. This project could be not just save the Salton Sea, but be a demonstration for all of the world that's suffering from droughts. With rising sea levels, they should be able to get more seawater. There are projects where they are building canals inland and then using solar greenhouses to desalinate water to provide for their plants. So I look at the Salton Sea as, integrate all these solutions. I hope you would have a big week-long event where all these different ideas can be discussed and people could integrate rather than fighting their narrow things, say, oh, this would work with your solution. And so when I worked in utilities, everything went wrong when, someone just had one goal to sell one thing. And I've dealt with IID, and a lot of their problems were very narrow-minded thinking. Not to mention anything wrong with IID, they are going to be a great partner in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. And yeah, always good to break down silos and integrate towards solutions. Great. So I also want to move on to the next speaker, and then, kind of also encourage to make sure we have time for everyone, folks to keep their questions brief, because we didn't really kind of factor in the time for the replies necessarily, and want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. I know some folks have to leave at 4:30.
So the next
Great.
speaker is Luis Almeida. Luis.
Audio check here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I just have some brief comments, maybe one a bit biased. Congratulations on Miguel. And, I just in reference to the past, and I've seen a lot of progress, and Secretary Crowfoot has, taken the appointment. One thing I'm always going to elevate is the disadvantaged environmental justice. Make sure that in your plans, all plans, any plan, environmental justice and disadvantaged communities are always front and center, and they always have a seat at the table. Any committee, any advisory, anything like that. I ask that environmental justice and disadvantage automatically get a seat. The other is, I just concur, with making sure that any project that gets put in place, that there's access and transportation. Just overall, I just want to thank Secretary Crowfoot. I want to thank Arturo and the leadership and all the staff for bringing it this far. Because I want to recognize of what happened, what has not happened in the past, and what has happened now is monumental change, monumental progress. So I'm not going to hold them accountable for what didn't happen in the past. However, a lot of these conversations do need money, and there are decisions being made in the state budget right now. And we need to make sure that every cent that has been committed doesn't start dwindling down. We need to make sure we get every last penny that has been promised in this legislative session. And that needs to be a priority, because, we can dream everything and anything, but if the money isn't there, then we need to start prioritizing public health. If the money is going to be there, and if this, budget, that sort of last, whatever budget decisions are being made right now, if the money is going to stay in there, then it builds confidence that, yeah, we can dream, long range plans, we can build, C2Cs, and we can build, projects as quickly as this SCH has been built, and most recently, right? So let's get through this budget, bring those dollars home, and then I think that'll just reinforce and build the confidence that, we can really dream big. Otherwise, we better start taking care of this public health urgently. It's an emergency. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Luis. And thank you for always putting disadvantaged and environmental justice communities front and center. I want to say we do have a stop at 4:30 because that's where closed captioning ends. So we have time for one more polling questions, and then folks who did not get an opportunity to speak again, please do email, and if you let us know that you did not speak and you want an opportunity to speak, we'll do our best to also make sure that you're first at the Thursday meeting, which again will be the same. So thanks everyone who participated so far. And we will move on. And I think one question may be for Victor. Okay, so we didn't receive any via Facebook Live. Thank you. So we will now move on to our next slide, which is again a Mentormeter polling question that will help guide future engagement in meetings.
Right. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks again for everyone for your questions and comments. For our final question, we would like to know what topic is of most interest to you for future meetings. So the options are learning about progress toward the long-range plan, meeting team members, learning about consultancy management program projects, community amenities, or sharing your experiences. And if we go to the next slide, we should see results coming in. Let's give it a second to refresh. Okay, there we go. So it seems like overwhelmingly learning about progress or the long-range plan, followed by learning about some more projects and community amenities. Let's just give it a last 5 seconds. Okay. All right, well, thank you all for participating. And I'll send it back to Sarah to close off.
Great. Thank you, Joanne. So I just wanted to thank everyone again who participated and brought such thoughtful questions and comments. It's really appreciated. So just real quick, it's a link to a website, email to reach out to for specific questions and comments. Again, if you were not able to have your voice heard today, please be sure to reach out so we can try to make sure for sure that you were early on Thursday. And then signing up for the Salt and the Sea listserv. Great. Well, thanks everyone so much, and have a great rest of the day.